Bristol, England, September 1943. A Royal Army Ordnance Corps inspection bay, fluorescent light buzzing over a line of newly assembled Bedford QL trucks bound for the North African Theater. A fitter named Harold Tanner, 41 years old, 17 years a mechanic before the war, stopped at the third vehicle in line and crouched under the chassis for longer than his supervisor thought necessary. He wasn't checking anything on the inspection sheet. He was looking at a single bolt on the steering drag link, torqued, painted with the factory's yellow witness mark, indistinguishable from 1,000 identical bolts he'd passed that week. Except this one had been backed off a quarter turn, and the paint reapplied over the gap. On paper, this was nothing. A truck that had passed every listed check, stamped and cleared by 2 prior inspectors. In reality, that quarter turn of slack meant the drag link would work itself loose within roughly 800 kilometers of desert corrugation, at which point the driver would lose steering control entirely, likely at speed, likely on a supply run where a wrecked truck meant more than a wrecked truck. The detail that saved that convoy wasn't a specification, it was a scuff of paint that didn't sit quite right. British quality assurance doctrine in 1943 rested heavily on documentation, torque specifications, witness marks, signed inspection cards, and a chain of accountability that assumed good faith at every station along the line. Standard military thinking emphasized the paperwork trail. If a component was torqued to spec, stamped, and signed off, it was considered sound. Ordnance inspectors were trained to check against a checklist. Was the bolt present? Was it the correct part number? Was the witness paint intact? Critics of slower, more instinctive inspectors like Tanner argued that his method didn't scale. You couldn't run an army on one man's gut feeling about how a nut looked. They were right that paperwork was necessary. They were wrong to think it was sufficient, because paperwork can only catch what it's designed to look for, and a compromised bolt that's been carefully repainted to match a legitimate mark passes every checklist a saboteur has already studied. What actually mattered was that sabotage, when it happened in occupied or supervised factory settings. And by 1943, British intelligence had confirmed several cases of deliberate undertorquing and material substitution in vehicle and munitions production traced to disgruntled or coerced labor, along with at least one substantiated case in a Midlands subcontracted parts shop where a machinist was later convicted of introducing undersized retaining pins into aircraft undercarriage assemblies. Wasn't designed to be caught by a checklist. It was designed to defeat one. A saboteur with access to torque wrenches and paint knew exactly what an inspector was told to look for, and built the fault to sit just inside the visible pass criteria. The secret was in learning to inspect the workmanship rather than the specification, the angle of a wrench mark, the consistency of paint texture across a batch, whether a correctly torqued bolt had the faint burnished pattern that genuine full torque application always left on the thread shoulders. Tanner had learned this not from a manual, but from 17 years of turning wrenches himself. Enough that his hands recognized when a fastener's resistance didn't match its supposed history. The proof came in stages, and it came ugly. Records from RAOC workshops in the Bristol and Birmingham areas through late 1943 and into 1944 show a pattern that only became visible in hindsight. 3 separate convoy breakdowns in Tunisia between June and August 1943, each involving steering or brake linkage failure on vehicles from the same production batch, each initially logged as manufacturing tolerance failure rather than sabotage. It was Tanner's report, filed after he pulled 2 more trucks from the same batch number and found the identical quarter-turn slack under identical repainted witness marks that connected the pattern. His written report to his workshop officer read, in part, "The paint is correct in color and correct in placement. It is wrong in one respect only. It does not show the crazing that fresh paint over a freshly torqued joint always shows within 48 hours. This paint was applied to a joint that had already been backed off. That distinction, crazing pattern on paint over a joint under residual stress versus paint applied to a joint with no stress at all, is not something any 1943 inspection checklist asked for. It required a man who'd painted and retorqued enough joints himself to know what the difference looked like. Once the pattern was flagged, RAOC investigators traced the affected batch to a specific assembly shift at a subcontracted parts supplier, and cross-referencing dismissal and disciplinary records, identified a machinist who had been quietly building compromised drag links into randomly selected units for roughly 6 weeks. The subsequent court-martial adjacent inquiry, handled partly through civilian courts given the supplier's non-military status, found the man had deliberately under-torqued and repainted 11 units before Tanner's inspection caught the pattern. Investigators later confirmed at least 4 of those 11 had already shipped to operational units, 2 of which had already suffered the field failures logged that summer. 4 fatalities from the earlier incidents, previously written off as driver error or road conditions, were reclassified once the sabotage pattern was confirmed. This wasn't a story where the sabotage was caught before any harm was done. It was a story where one man's refusal to trust a checklist stopped it from continuing. This wasn't accidental vigilance, and it wasn't paranoia dressed up as skill. Commanders and workshop officers who backed Tanner's slower, more hands-on inspection method weren't clinging to old-fashioned mechanical intuition out of stubbornness. They understood that any inspection system built entirely around known, published criteria is, by definition, a system a determined adversary can study and defeat, because the criteria themselves are the vulnerability. A checklist tells you what right looks like. It doesn't tell you what wrong is trying to look like right. What looked adequate in a controlled ordnance depot, stamped cards, signed witness marks, torque specifications verified on paper, didn't hold up against a saboteur working inside the supply chain who had every incentive to learn exactly what those controls checked for and build his fault just outside their reach. Battlefields and the supply chains that feed them aren't static test conditions where a threat behaves the same way twice. They're adversarial, and an adversarial system requires inspectors who look past the specification to the workmanship underneath it. The wider RAOC response, once Tanner's method was formally recognized, was to institute what workshop officers began informally calling second-hand inspection, pulling a small percentage of already cleared vehicles for a completely independent recheck by a different inspector using tactile and visual judgment rather than the original checklist, specifically hunting for inconsistencies between a component's supposed service history and its physical evidence. This wasn't a technological fix. It was an admission that documentation alone could be gamed, and that the most reliable check in the chain was the experienced pair of hands that knew what a properly stressed, properly aged, properly torqued joint actually felt and looked like, versus one that had been made to merely resemble one. Tanner himself was reportedly unimpressed by his own recognition, telling a workshop officer, according to a unit history compiled after the war, that he hadn't done anything clever, only what any mechanic does when a job doesn't sit right in his hands. A sentiment that undersold exactly how rare that kind of attentiveness was under wartime production pressure, when speed and throughput were rewarded far more visibly than a fitter who slowed a line down to stare at a bolt. The deeper principle here, one that quality assurance and counter-sabotage doctrine would spend the rest of the war and long after formalizing, was that any inspection regime built purely on stated criteria eventually becomes a map for defeating it. A checklist is only as good as the imagination of the person who wrote it, and a saboteur, or simply a corner-cutting subcontractor under production pressure, only has to be as clever as the checklist, not cleverer than the person holding the wrench. Tanner's contribution wasn't a new tool or a new standard. It was proof that experienced human judgment, the kind built from thousands of hours of doing the actual physical work rather than auditing paperwork about it, remained the last and most reliable line of defense against a threat that had specifically learned to pass every official test. The trucks that rolled out of Bristol after 1943 carried the same specifications, the same witness paint, the same signed cards. What changed was that somewhere down the line, at least a few of them were checked by men who'd been taught to trust their hands over the paperwork. And that difference, invisible on any inspection form, was the one that kept convoys running and crews alive.